The day Margaret Sullivan was supposed to arrive, I wore my Sunday best. Shaved close, brushed my boots twice, even put out biscuits I baked myself, which is saying something, because I hate baking. I hadn't seen a woman in 3 winters who wasn't married or meaner than a rattler, but Margaret was different. We had written letters for months, shared dreams and fears in neat cursive. She was educated, curious, gentle. She wanted children, said she didn't mind the solitude of a ranch, claimed she could make a home out of anything. I believed her. So when the wagon came bouncing down the trail, raising a cloud behind it, my heart near broke through my ribs. I stepped off the porch and watched it roll to a stop just past the hitching post. Only it wasn't Margaret who climbed down. A different woman stepped off the wagon. Her bonnet was dust-stained, her skirts wrinkled, and her eyes, well, they told a story before she even opened her mouth. Behind her came a flurry of movement. 5 children, stair-stepped in size, none older than 10. "Mr. Clayton Reeves?" she asked, her voice low and tired but kind. I hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." She reached into her satchel and handed me an envelope. I knew that handwriting. It was mine. The ink was mine, the words were mine, but where it had once said, "Dear Margaret," the name Lillian was penciled in, faint but visible. That's when I realized I'd been had. Not swindled, maybe, but redirected. Margaret wasn't coming. Never was. I looked up again. Lillian's face was flushed with shame, and her kids stood in a clump behind her, dusty and wide-eyed, their clothes patched in 3 places too many. "I got nowhere else," she said plainly, "but I won't stay where I'm not welcome." Her words weren't a plea. They were a statement of fact, and I could tell she'd said 'em before, probably too many times. I wanted to be mad. I should have been mad. I'd planned a future with someone who didn't exist, and here was this stranger asking for shelter with 5 hungry mouths. But instead of turning her away, I nodded once and said, "You all must be hungry." She blinked. "We are." "Well," I said, stepping aside and pointing toward the porch, "I made biscuits. They ain't much, but they're warm." The smallest child smiled. The others looked unsure. Lillian gave me the smallest nod I've ever seen, but in it lived 1,000 years of weariness. And just like that, my life tilted sideways, and I knew it'd never sit square again.
The children ate like starved raccoons, quick and wide-eyed, as if someone might snatch the biscuits from their hands. I stood by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching crumbs scatter across my floorboards. Lillian didn't touch a thing. She sat proper, back straight, despite the exhaustion in her eyes. There was pride in her posture, a hard-earned kind that didn't beg or apologize. When the children were finally full and slumped like sacks against the wall, I broke the silence. "You said Margaret gave you my letters?" She nodded. "She asked me to write them for her, said she wasn't much good with words." I remembered Margaret's flowery phrases, the tidy thoughts folded into each envelope. I thought it was strange how her tone shifted over time, got warmer, more vivid. Turns out it wasn't Margaret I'd come to know at all. "So," I said, walking toward the table and sitting across from her, "you wrote me." She met my eyes. "Some of it, not all." She reached into her satchel again and pulled out a folded stack of letters. "These are the ones you sent. I didn't change a word, except the name." She pushed the top letter toward me. My words greeted me like old ghosts, familiar but strange in this new context. I flipped through and stopped on one from last November. Dear Margaret, it began in ink, but right over it, in faint pencil, Lillian. You ever lie to me, besides the name? She took a moment. No. Everything I said about losing my husband, about needing a fresh start, that was true. What happened to him? James Harper. He was a miner, struck a small vein outside Prescott, made just enough to dream bigger. Her eyes went soft. Bandits hit the claim. He was gunned down trying to protect it. I'd heard stories like it before, too many. A man scrapes together hope only to be buried under it. He was a good man, she added, and I buried him myself, didn't have no one else. My gut twisted. I didn't know James Harper, but I knew the kind that left behind too much unfinished. And the children? 3 are mine. 2 are James's from before, their mothers both gone. You took them all in? She looked me square in the face. What kind of woman wouldn't? I rubbed a hand across my chin, buying time. I'd expected to build a life from scratch, with someone gentle, predictable, childless. Instead, here sat a woman who'd survived fire, dragging 5 souls with her through the ashes. I ain't got much room, I said, finally. Just the 1 extra bedroom, and that barn's half rotten. We've slept in worse, she said, not flinching. There was no manipulation in her tone, just plain truth. I glanced back at the kids, already nodding off in a heap by the hearth. One of them clutched a biscuit like a treasure. I'll put fresh hay in the barn, I muttered. They can sleep there tonight. You take the room. She stood. That's kind of you. Don't get used to it, I said gruffly, standing too. This ain't permanent. Her gaze lingered on me a second longer than it should have. Nothing ever is, Mr. Reeves. That night, after the lanterns were out and silence settled over the ranch like a snowfall, I stared at the ceiling from my cot in the kitchen. I thought about how easy it is to write a name, and how impossible it is to erase a past.
A week passed, then 2. Days slipped by like tired mules, slow, repetitive, full of quiet burden. The barn held together better than I'd expected, though it leaked some during the last storm. The children adjusted fast, as they do. Little things told me they'd seen hard roads, how they never left a scrap on their plates, how they flinched at sudden sounds, how they watched each other's backs without saying a word. Lillian earned her keep without being asked. She sewed a torn saddlebag I'd meant to toss, patched my shirt so neatly I barely recognized 'em, and got my front gate swinging smooth again. She never called this place home, but she treated it like one. Still, I kept my distance, until the morning I stepped into the parlor and saw a photo frame on the windowsill. It hadn't been there before. A tintype, sun-faded and worn at the edges, but still clear enough to make out the man's face. Strong jaw, honest eyes, union coat. His arm wrapped around a younger Lillian, her cheeks fuller, eyes softer. James Harper. The name hit me like a hammer to the chest. I knew him. Not just in passing. He and I had fought side by side at Cold Harbor, dug trenches in Tennessee, shared whiskey and stories and one stolen harmonica. We'd parted badly. Last I saw him, we were shouting over a campfire. He accused me of cowardice. I accused him of getting men killed. Then he vanished into the dark,
transferred out 2 days later. I never thought I'd hear his name again, let alone see his widow scrubbing my wash basin. I picked up the photo, studying his face. He looked younger than I remembered, hopeful, maybe, and made me sick to my stomach. Lillian entered, drying her hands on a cloth. She froze when she saw what I was holding. "You knew him," she said, not asking. "Fought with him, long time ago." She stepped closer. "He never talked about the war much, said it left more ghosts than glory." I set the photo down. "He say anything about me?" She hesitated. "Only that he had a friend once, someone he trusted more than a brother, until he didn't." That landed hard. "I didn't know you were his wife," I said. "I didn't know you were that Clayton until the kids mentioned your full name. Then I saw the way you carried yourself. Same quiet weight." I moved past her toward the door, needing air, but she followed me out to the porch. "He made me promise something," she said, stopping at the threshold. "He said if anything ever happened to him, I should find a man named Reeves. Said you were a hard man, but you'd keep your word." I stared out across the dry pasture. "He was wrong about a lot." "Maybe, but he was right about some things too." Her voice didn't plead. It just rested on the truth. I thought about the letter she still hadn't let me read, the one she said James left behind with my name on it. "You have it?" I asked. She nodded. "He said to give it to you only when it truly mattered." I said nothing. "Do you want it now?" I shook my head. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face that version of James, not in ink, not in memory. She stepped back inside, leaving me alone with the creak of the porch boards and the sound of 5 children waking in the barn. I lit a cigarette and watched the wind play with the dust. James Harper had found his way back into my life, not through bullets or vengeance, but through a woman with nothing left but grit and the ghost of a promise. The days that followed carried a strange weight, like I was walking in boots a size too big, never quite steady. Every time I looked at Lillian, I saw James Harper's ghost trailing behind her, whispering reminders I wasn't ready to hear. She kept to her chores, never overstepped, never asked for more than was given. The children brought some light to the place, drawing in the dust with sticks, chasing chickens, learning to ride the old mule. It would have almost felt like a home if I let myself believe in such things. Then came the knock. It was a hard, impatient thud on the front door just after dawn. I was up already, as always, nursing coffee and waiting for the rooster to quit his lies. When I opened the door, 2 men in long dusters stood on the porch. One wore a badge, U.S. Marshal. The other was lean and quiet, hat low, eyes scanning the land like trouble might sprout from the soil. "Clayton Reeves?" the marshal asked. I nodded, already bracing. "We're looking for someone. Woman, 5 children. Traveled through from Arizona territory 2 weeks ago." I kept my face still. "Plenty of folks pass through here." He reached into his coat and pulled out a poster. I took it. The paper was creased and sun-faded, but the likeness hit like a rifle butt to the gut. It was Lillian. Name printed in bold beneath. Lillian Cross, wanted for bank robbery, aiding in murder, interstate flight. Reward, $500. My hands didn't shake, but my breath sure did. "Your wife?" the marshal asked. No, I said, too quick. She's helping on the ranch. He squinted at me. You seen her? I hesitated. Not sure. You'd be sure. She's got 5 kids, 3 boys, 2 girls, smallest one's red-headed. I glanced past him to where the barn sat quiet in the morning sun. You fellas want coffee? The marshal tilted his head. We'll take some. Been riding since El Paso. I let him in. The lean one never spoke, just sat, watched, listened. They didn't stay long, drank their coffee, asked a few more questions, and left me with the poster. Said they'd be circling back by evening just in case I remembered anything. The second they were gone, I walked out to the barn. Lillian was already there, spooning oats into a bucket. She turned when she saw my face. What is it? I handed her the poster, watched the blood drain from her cheeks as she read. I didn't, she started, but I cut her off. I need the truth, all of it, right now. She looked at the children, then back at me. It's not me, Clayton, I swear it. You look just like her. I am her, but not in the way they think. I waited. My maiden name was Lillian Cross, but I never robbed a bank, never killed anyone. That woman, whoever she is, she's using my name, my history. Maybe James's old contacts gave her the idea. I don't know. That's a hell of a mix-up, I said coldly. I know how it sounds, but I've never held a gun in anger. My kids ain't criminals. We just want peace. I wanted to believe her. Lord help me, I did. But the law didn't wait on belief, and they'd be back by sundown. What's in James's letter? I asked suddenly. She hesitated. Give it to me, I said. She reached into her apron, pulled out the sealed envelope, and handed it with trembling hands. I didn't open it. Not yet. I tucked it into my vest. I'll decide what to do before sundown, I told her. She nodded. No begging, no tears, just that same quiet, heartbreaking dignity. As I walked back to the house, one thought played over and over in my mind. Either I was about to protect an innocent woman from false justice, or I was harboring a liar with blood on her hands.
I sat on the porch most of that afternoon, letter in my lap like a coiled rattler. Didn't matter how many times I ran my thumb across the envelope, James's name in the corner felt like it burned into my skin. Inside, the house was quiet. The children played in the barn, keeping low, like Lillian told them. She stayed in the kitchen, silent as stone. Finally, I tore the envelope open. His handwriting came rushing back like smoke from a campfire. Strong, blocky letters, the kind you carved into fence posts when you wanted them to last. Clayton, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and I hope to hell I'm wrong about what's coming. But if I'm not, if Lillian shows up at your door with those kids, then I'm asking you for the biggest favor one man can ask of another. I stopped, looked toward the barn, took a long breath, and kept reading. She doesn't know what I did, doesn't need to. I ran with the wrong men after the war. Tried to get clean, but the past doesn't let go easy. If someone's chasing her, it's because of me, because I couldn't outrun what I used to be. You and I, hell, we weren't on good terms when we parted, I know that. But you were the best man I ever knew when it counted. Braver than me, straighter. We lost a lot of good ones out there. I swore if I ever had a family,
I'd find a man like you to protect 'em if I fell. So here I am, asking, begging, if it comes to that. Keep 'em safe, Reeves, no matter what comes riding in behind 'em. James Harper. The letter trembled in my hand, though the wind had died. I sat there a long while, listening to the house breathe, to the creak of floorboards, the shuffle of boots in the barn, the way dust floated in the light like ash from something that burned long ago. When I finally stood, I wasn't confused anymore. I found Lillian by the hearth, knees tucked beneath her skirt, hands folded like she was praying but couldn't remember how. She looked up at me like a woman standing trial. I read it, I said. She didn't ask what it said, just waited. I believe you, Lillian, I told her. James made mistakes, not you. You're not the one they're after. Her lip quivered, but she pressed it firm. So what now? I'm not turning you in, Lillian. She looked away, swallowing hard. They'll be back. I know. And if they don't believe us, then they'll have to go through me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with relief, sorrow, fear, and something else, something that wouldn't been between us before. Gratitude so heavy it nearly broke her. I reached for her hand, and she let me take it. I don't know what this is, but I know what I'm not willing to lose again. The sun was low by then, casting long shadows across the porch. I holstered my Colt, checked the chamber, and stepped outside. Whatever came with the dark, I was ready for it. Because I'd made a vow once, to fight for the good man beside me. And if that meant becoming the wall between Lillian Harper and a world that wouldn't leave her be, and I'd stand tall, even if I fell doing it.
The marshals didn't return by sunset like they said. They came at dawn, and they weren't alone. I'd barely gotten the coffee going when I heard hooves pounding the earth, too many for two men. I stepped onto the porch, hand resting light on my Colt, and counted 4 riders, dust boiling behind 'em. But it wasn't the law who led 'em. It was a woman. She rode like she was born in a saddle, rifle across her lap, black duster flapping like crow wings behind her. Her face was hard and hollow-cheeked, her eyes sharp and dark like 2 shards of broken glass. She pulled up 10 paces from my porch and swung down from the saddle with a grace I didn't trust. "You Clayton Reeves?" she asked. "I am," I said. "I'm looking for Lillian Cross." I didn't answer, just squared my shoulders. "Relax," she said, smiling like a snake in spring. "I ain't here to hurt nobody, unless I'm forced to." Behind her, the 3 men dismounted slowly, hands near their guns. "You the one the marshals are really after?" I asked. Her smile widened. "Guess they got the wrong gal. Shame, really, but I'll take the heat if it comes. First, I want what's mine." "Which is?" "The take. Prescott Bank, $7,000. Your little house guest rode with the man who stole it, James Harper." "You're lying," I said. "I ain't. I was there. Didn't fire a shot, but I rode clean up. James got greedy, hid the cash and skipped town with his family before the law came sniffing. He owed me half. I figure his widow has it now." "She doesn't," I said flatly. The woman laughed. "You that sure? I read James's last letter. There's no money." "Then she knows where it is." She took a slow step forward, raising the rifle just enough to remind me it wasn't for decoration. "Bring her out, or I start dragging the place down beam by beam." Behind me, I heard the screen door creak open. "I'm right here," Lillian said. Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled against the doorframe. The outlaw's eyes lit up.
Well, look at that, the infamous Lillian Cross, alive and breathing. Got your dead man's eyes, I'll give you that. I don't have your money. James never told me where it went. That's so?" She nodded. "Well then," the woman said, cocking the rifle, "I guess you're not worth as much as I hoped." I moved before the thought fully formed, drew fast and low, like the war had never ended. My bullet hit the rifle clean, tore it from her hands. She screamed, clutching her wrist, and stumbled back as the weapon clattered to the dirt. The 3 men reached for steel, but stopped cold when they heard the click of hammers behind them. Marshals. They'd flanked the barn, crept in, silent as dust devils. Now they stood with rifles raised, calm and deadly. "Drop 'em," one barked. The men obeyed. The outlaw woman looked at me, fury in her eyes. "You just signed her death warrant, cowboy." "No," I said, stepping down into the dirt. "I just ended yours." The marshals took her in cuffs along with her gang. Said they'd been trailing them since Arizona. Lillian's name would be cleared, they promised. The truth had a funny way of rising once bullets stopped flying. Lillian didn't cry. She just stood there with the morning sun behind her, arms crossed, jaw clenched. But when I walked back up the steps and took her hand, she didn't let go.
The days after the shootout passed like a dream half remembered. Quiet, tender, unsure. The kind of peace that made you flinch, waiting for it to end. The marshals stayed for a spell, filled out their papers, and drank my coffee like it was church wine. One of them tipped his hat to Lillian and said, "Ma'am, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but you handled it better than most men I've known." She thanked him, but her eyes stayed guarded. After they rode off, it was just us again. Me, Lillian, the kids, and the ghosts we hadn't fully buried. That evening, she stood in the garden she'd planted out back. Rows of tomatoes just starting to show green, squash vines curling like fingers across the soil. I watched her from the porch, saw the breeze lift her hair, and wondered if peace looked like this. But I knew what was coming. She turned slowly, hands brushing the dirt off her dress. "You know I'm not the woman you wrote to," she said. I nodded. "I figured that out the moment you stepped off the wagon." "I'd deceived you," she said plainly. "Took another woman's place. Brought children you didn't ask for. Stirred up trouble that almost got you killed." I said, "You brought life into a place that was dying. That porch hadn't heard laughter in 5 years. I'd forgotten what a full table looked like." She looked down. "You still had a choice. You didn't have to keep us." "No, I didn't." She met my eyes then, full of fire and fear. "So what now, Clayton? Am I just another storm that passed through, or do you mean to build something with me?" I stepped down from the porch, slow and sure. "I don't want the life I thought I wanted. Not anymore." "You sure?" she asked. "You had plans. A quiet house, no noise, no baggage." "Turns out I was lonely, not peaceful." Her voice softened. "And now?" I took her hands in mine. "Now I've got a garden out back. I've got boots on the porch I trip over 'cause 5 little feet forget where they leave 'em. I've got a woman who fights like hell for what's right. I'd be a damn fool to walk away from that." Tears welled, but she blinked 'em back. "I can't promise easy, Clayton." "I ain't asking for easy," I said. "I'm asking if you'll stay." She looked at the sky, the horizon, the land that had both saved and scarred her. Then she nodded once. "I'll stay." That night we ate stew by lantern light. The kids passed a harmonica between them, trying to play the same 3 notes James once whistled by campfire. And for the first time in a long, long while, my house felt like home.
6 months later, the wind carried music instead of dust. Neighbors from miles around came with fresh bread and bottles of whiskey.
Even the marshal from El Paso sent a telegram. Heard she said yes. Reckon you won the real prize, cowboy. Lillian wore a blue dress that she stitched herself. Nothing fancy. But when she stepped through the arch of cedarwood I'd built with my own hands, the whole prairie seemed to hold its breath. I stood waiting under the shade tree near the house, boots polished, hat in my hand, heart thudding like a drum. The kids scattered flower petals, wild ones, crooked and mismatched, and giggled every time the wind tried to blow them back the other way. I said my vow's simple. I once made a promise to a dying man. Today I make another to the woman he loved and the life we've made. Lillian's voice cracked on hers. I came here looking for safety. I found a home. We were married by sundown, ate stew and pie, danced until the fire burned low and the children fell asleep in a pile of blankets. Later that night, she sat beside me on the porch, bare feet tucked beneath her, staring out at the land. "You ever think about how it all started?" she asked. "Every day," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "That wasn't Margaret's story. It was mine all along." I wrapped an arm around her. "And I'm glad I was too stubborn to send you away." She laughed softly. "You were scared." "I still am," I admitted. "Not of you, just of losing what we built." She took my hand, placed it over her stomach. A beat passed, then another. "You're not losing anything," she whispered. "You're about to gain more than you bargained for." It hit me slow, then all at once. A new life, again. I didn't speak, just held her tighter. The old stories folks tell in these parts about outlaws and shootouts, broken hearts and redemption, they're usually louder than ours. But this one traveled quiet. Word spread slow but sure, like good seeds taking root. A widow showed up on the wrong doorstep. A rancher opened the door anyway. And together, they turned grief into something worth growing. James Harper's memory still walked the halls sometimes, especially when I caught the oldest boy standing tall like a soldier, or when that rusty harmonica played a tune I hadn't heard since the war. But he didn't haunt us. He'd made a promise once. And now, through me, through all of us, that promise was kept.